Moving on to the markets, as the holiday season draws near, we are examining current beef demand and looking toward the new year. Earlier this week, we were joined by Iowa State livestock economist Schulz to discuss the sustainability of beef demand as consumer prices have spiked in recent months. We also discussed the lean hog markets, but we began our conversation by asking him about the factors that are currently driving beef demand.
Well, I think, the reason I put out that article is just to remind us of what drives beef demand. A lot of times we'll hear, prices are high for beef, demand must be great, or we're selling a lot of beef and demand must be great. But we need to understand what actually drives demand, and those factors are consumer incomes, substitutes and complements, and consumer tastes and preferences. So to briefly walk through those, we've seen that consumers prefer beef. We've seen that during the pandemic. They made some very quick changes to be able to get beef in the grocery stores as opposed to in food service. So I think that expectations is that's going to hold. As far as consumer incomes, the economy has really rebounded much better than I think a lot of us expected. And when we compare to previous disruptions, we look at unemployment rates in November, they were as low as they've been since back pre-pandemic in February 2020. And then we look at substitutes. Pork is really, we've seen as high increases year over year. We've seen increases in poultry prices, especially turkey prices. And so really you're looking at the factors that have driven demand have really been supportive of that.
Lee, here's a question from a viewer. Do you think the price of beef is sustainable for consumers, especially as the holiday season is approaching and those consumers will see the price difference in a prime rib as compared to the same time last year?
Yeah, so this is a question we continually get. Now, in my view, I think the biggest hike is likely behind us. That doesn't say that we're not going to see higher prices going forward, but the large year over year or month over month increases, I think those are behind us due to, I think, a lot of the inflationary costs like labor, transportation. Those have been bid into a lot of the prices already. Those are rather sticky over time, and I think we've made a lot of those big adjustments already. But as we look at, prices going forward, I think it's important to realize the impact of featuring. So I like to look at the USDA report for beef featuring. They release that report weekly, and it shows that featuring in November was up a lot for beef. So realizing that consumers are still, or retailers are still in the business of moving product. And so even though we've seen higher prices, we've seen their desire to offer that product at deals for consumers. I think we've even seen it in ground beef where that's a very common product, but retailers have been really featuring it because maybe you're seeing the higher prices for steak, the higher prices for ground beef aren't as much a sticker shock. And then I looked at that report for last week, and actually filet mignon, tenderloin, boneless beef, sirloin roasts were actually lower than last year and lower than the previous month. So for that, me, it highlights that there's still deals out there. Consumers just have to be aware and ready to act on those deals.
Let's shift over to the hog market for a second. What are you currently watching in the lean hog markets?
So really direction. If you look back to fall of 2020 until about the midpoint of this last year in 2021, we've been in a tremendous bullish market. And then really since June, we've been trading rather sideways. And I think it's been a lot of fundamentals impacting the market different ways. So for me, it's kind of looking at, do we see a trend going forward into 2022 and something that gives us some direction as far as pricing and risk management opportunities.
As we work our way toward the end of the year, what would you say is the biggest story of 2021, and what should meat producers keep an eye on as we head into 2022?
It's a one-word: resilience. I think you look at the meat supply chains, all the disruptions that have come about in 2020 and really went into 2021, and just the resilience of those industries to maintain the supplies that we have seen. I think going forward, I think we're entering a period where supplies are tightening, especially as we look in the cattle industry. I think there's some signals both ways for the pork industry, but that's a much different dynamic than we've been in the last couple of years, where we've seen increased supplies being available for consumers with the really strong demand that we've seen in the marketplace. One thing I really watch and is on my radar is the impact of labor. Labor is truly a shortage, and I don't use that word lightly, as we've seen higher wage rates, but we can't really see increased labor, and that's really impacting, I think, animal agriculture, and it's something I continue to watch and its longer term impact.
Lee, before we run out of time here, what marketing or risk management advice would you care to leave our audience with today? Well,
when we look at hog margins, expectations are, I think they're going to tighten a bit in 2022. Cattle opportunities, I think there's going to be some more. So it's taking advantage of those opportunities to, maximizing the potential for profits, minimizing, potential for losses. There's a lot of ways we can do that. I think we've seen attractiveness of insurance programs like livestock risk protection. And so realizing, I would encourage producers to understand what they have available in their toolbox, and given what the markets look like in 2022, utilize those in the appropriate times.